Out of roughly 300,000 people who went looking for gold, only a handful became rich. And most of the time it was not the ones standing knee-deep in rivers with a pan. The California gold rush is not a romantic story about brave adventurers striking it rich. It is a story of mass obsession, where the vast majority lost money, health, and their lives. The real fortunes were made by the people who sold shovels. Now I'll tell the real story of the gold rush. Who went there, what awaited them, how they lived, what they ate, and how much they actually earned. I will show how much a simple shovel cost during peak periods at the goldfields, and why a single egg could cost as much as a worker's weekly wage. On January 24th, 1848, James Marshall finds a gold nugget in a river at Sutter's sawmill in California. The owner of the mill, John Sutter, tries to keep the discovery secret. He's afraid that crowds of people will destroy his business. But one of the workers tells about the discovery to Samuel Brannan. Samuel Brannan was not a wealthy man, and at that time California was not a rich state. It was a remote territory with small settlements, no banks, no roads, and no developed trade. Brannan made his living by serving settlers. He opened a general store with basic supplies and published a newspaper called California Star. This gave him money, trade connections, and most importantly, an advantage access to information and the trust of people. When gold appeared, he was one of the few who already had goods, capital, and an understanding of how to make money not in the river, but from the rush itself. And Brannan immediately saw the opportunity. While thousands of people were heading to California in search of gold, a man named Samuel Brannan understood the key idea. Money could be made not in the river, but on those who were going there. He did not become a gold prospector. He became a merchant, and that made him one of the richest people of the gold rush era. He did not stay silent. On the contrary, he prepared to fuel the frenzy. Brannan bought up nearly every available supply that could be useful for gold mining: shovels, pickaxes, tents, boots, flour, tools, and of course, alcohol. He purchased goods in San Francisco, on the East Coast, and in Mexico at normal prices of the time. Shovels cost about $1. He bought them by the hundreds. Then in May of 1848, Brannan walks the streets of San Francisco. He waves a bottle filled with gold dust and shouts about gold that has been found in the river. People gather around him. He shows the gold and tells stories about the discoveries. The city is seized by frenzy. Men abandon their jobs. Shops close. Sailors desert their ships. Everyone rushes to the gold fields. And everyone needs tools and supplies. Brannan opened stores near the mining areas. A shovel bought at a normal price of about $1 could sell for $50, and in some camps even reach $100. People paid with gold dust, barely bargaining. The more people believed in their chance to get rich, the more goods they needed, and Brannan sold all of it: food, clothing, boots, alcohol. Markups reached hundreds and sometimes thousands of %. There were almost no alternatives, and people paid. According to eyewitness accounts, in the first weeks of the rush, Brannan earned tens of thousands of dollars, at a time when a worker's yearly wage was around $300. That is how he became one of California's first millionaires, without mining a single gram of gold. And by the end of the year, the entire world knew. Gold had been found in California, and the madness began. 1849. Hundreds of thousands of people rushed to California from all over the world. By different estimates, around 300,000 people arrived there over the next few years. They were called the 49ers, after the year the mass migration began. They left their jobs, their families, their homes. They sold their property, took loans, and risked their lives for a chance to get rich. Who were these people who gave up everything for gold? All kinds of people: farmers from the eastern United States, worn down by poverty, merchants ruined by economic crises, sailors who deserted their ships in San Francisco, Europeans fleeing revolutions and hardship, and Chinese migrants escaping war and famine. People arrived from Latin America, from Mexico, Chile, and Peru. They had an advantage. They already knew how to mine gold. Australians came as well, even Russians from Alaska. It was a global migration. The average age was around 25. About 90% were men. Many left behind wives and children, promising to return rich within a year. A significant number never returned at all, and those who did often came back poorer than when they had left. What drove them? Not just greed, desperation. The 1840s were a time of economic crises in the United States and Europe: unemployment, hunger, instability. Gold seemed like a chance to escape poverty. Stories of people finding the nuggets worth thousands of dollars spread instantly and were often exaggerated. Newspapers fueled the hysteria. They wrote about incredible finds, but hardly ever mentioned the thousands of failures. It created the impression that gold was lying on the surface. All you had to do was bend down and pick it up. In reality, by 1849, the easy gold in many areas had already been claimed. Newcomers often arrived at depleted sites. Most had no experience in mining. They were farmers, clerks, shopkeepers. They didn't know how to pan for gold, where to look, or how to survive in the wilderness. They were gambling on luck, and luck smiled on very few. Reaching California in 1849 was a real survival quest. There were 3 main routes. The first was by sea around Cape Horn, the southern tip of South America, about 18,000 miles and up to 6 months at sea. A ticket cost $300 to $400, roughly a year's wages for a worker. Conditions on the ships were harsh. Crowding, poor sanitation, spoiled food, water shortages, and of course, disease. Storms around Cape Horn sank ships. By some estimates, the death rate on this route could reach 5 to 10%, depending on the voyage and conditions. Even so, it was considered the safest option. What did the travelers write about it? Month after month, nothing but sky and water. Our food had turned into hardtack, crawling with worms, and salted meat that tasted like the sole of an old boot. When we reached Cape Horn, the ocean seemed to go mad. Waves as tall as mountains crashed onto the deck, and each of us prayed, not expecting to see the next sunrise. From the diary of Enos Crispin, a passenger on the schooner Europa. The second route was through Panama, by sea to the Atlantic coast, then on foot through the jungles of the Isthmus of Panama, and by sea again to California. Faster. 2 to 3 months. Cheaper, around $200 to $300, but more dangerous. Jungles, heat, swamps, yellow fever, cholera, dysentery. People died along the way. Bodies were often left right in the jungle. On the Pacific side of Panama, thousands of people would gather, waiting for ships for weeks and months. Diseases cut down the crowds. According to eyewitnesses and historians, the death rate on this route could reach 10 to 25%, especially during peak epidemics. The third route was overland, about 2,000 miles across prairies, deserts, and mountains. The journey took 4 to 5 months. Water shortages, hunger, cholera along the Platte River, harsh crossings through the Sierra Nevada. By some estimates, the average death rate was up to 15%, but in bad years it was much higher. This is what Bayard Taylor, a reporter and traveler sent to cover the gold rush, wrote about the Panama route. Panama is the gateway to hell. We waded through knee-deep, sticky mud, choking on the fumes of the jungle. At every step, death was waiting for us. If not from a snake bite, then from cholera. I saw people who were full of strength in the morning, and by evening were being buried in shallow graves by the trail. So let's say you survived the journey and finally reached the gold fields. And what do you see? Not a city, not civilization, but a chaotic tent camp with thousands of people. Mud everywhere, poor sanitation, no real laws. There's almost no official authority. An unwritten rule applies. Whoever claims a piece of land first owns it. Housing means a tent if you're lucky. Or a tarp tied between trees. A rough shelter made of branches. Many sleep under the open sky. In the mountains, winter temperatures drop below freezing. In summer, the heat reaches 42 degrees. Rain turns the camps into swamps. Fires regularly wipe out entire settlements. Work meant 10 to 12 hours a day in icy river water, washing sand and gravel in a pan, hoping to find tiny specks of gold. Backs ached. Hands were eaten away by the cold. Rheumatism, arthritis, constant colds. Many ruined their health for life. Sanitation was almost non-existent. Drinking water came from polluted rivers. The result was epidemics. Deaths from disease often exceeded deaths from accidents. Doctors and medicine were desperately scarce. Food was expensive and monotonous. Salted pork, beans, hardtack, sometimes flour. Fresh vegetables and fruit were rare. The result was scurvy, bleeding gums, lost teeth, wounds that would not heal. Prices in peak periods in remote camps became absurd. 1 egg cost $3, a loaf of bread about $2. An apple could cost up to $5. A shovel sometimes sold for $50. A worker on the East Coast earned about $2 a day at the time. All because of shortages and expensive transport. Goods were hauled for weeks from San Francisco. Merchants raised prices many times over. Prospectors paid because they had no choice. A French traveler wrote, "In San Francisco, I saw a man pay for a single egg what would have bought a luxurious dinner for 3 in New York. Here, gold has lost its value. It cannot buy health, and often it is not even enough to keep a person from starving. After 10 or 12 hours of work in icy water, a man wanted to forget everything. What entertainment existed in the camps? Saloons and alcohol were the main escape from exhaustion, loneliness, and disappointment. Whiskey, beer, anything people could get. Heavy drinking was widespread, gambling was everywhere, poker and dice. In a single evening, a prospector could lose everything he had washed out in a week. gambling houses often made more stable profits than the goldfields themselves. Prostitution was common. There were very few women and enormous demand. According to contemporary accounts, some women earned more than most prospectors. Violence was part of everyday life. Fistfights, knife attacks, shootouts. There was almost no official police presence. Conflicts were settled by force. Vigilante justice and lynchings happened regularly. People suspected of theft could be hanged without a trial. Disputes over land sometimes ended in murder. Cultural entertainment was rare. Occasionally traveling theaters arrived. Singers, magicians. A ticket could cost several dollars in gold dust. Newspapers were expensive, but they were read aloud and passed from hand to hand. Letters from family took months to arrive and were the only connection to a former life. By the way, if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to like and subscribe, and feel free to leave a comment below. The most important question is this: how much could you actually earn? In 1848, at the very beginning, quite a lot. Gold lay directly in riverbeds and between stones. According to eyewitness accounts, a man could wash out $10 or $20 a day, sometimes more. There were rare finds worth hundreds or even thousands of dollars, but by 1849 the situation had changed. The easy gold was gone in many places. Miners had to dig deeper and process far more material. Average earnings began to fall, first to $5 or $10 a day, by 1850 to $3 or $5, and by the early 1850s many were earning only $1 or $2 a day. Now let's remember the prices. Food, tools, and housing were expensive. If a person spent $3 or $4 a day just to survive and earned $5, the net profit almost disappeared. Over a year, with luck, it was possible to save a few $100s. And that does not include travel debts, which many took on before they even arrived. According to various historical estimates, about half of all prospectors failed to cover their expenses at all. A large share earned very little. Only a few percent managed to save an amount equal to several years of a normal wage. And roughly about 1% truly became rich. This means that the vast majority either returned home empty-handed or stayed in California poor and broken by illness. Many did not live long enough to return at all. Now the main question: who actually got rich during the gold rush? The answer is simple. Not the prospectors, but the people who served them. Merchants selling tools, food, clothing, transport, and entertainment. They earned steadily and with far less risk. Take Samuel Brannan, for example. The same merchant. He opened stores near the gold fields and sold everything miners needed. Within a few years, he became California's first millionaire without washing a single gram of gold. Or Levi Strauss. He arrived in California in 1853. At first, he sold canvas and supplies for mining camps. Then he noticed that work clothes tore constantly. He began making durable pants from a heavy fabric, reinforced with metal rivets. That's how Levi's jeans were born. The company still exists today and is worth billions of dollars. These examples show the same pattern. The most reliable money was not made in the rivers, but in trade and services. Saloons, gambling houses, hotels, and transport companies earned profits every single day. A prospector could work for months and find nothing. A merchant made money on every sale. The risk was low. The income was steady. By the mid-1850s, the gold rush was gradually fading. The easy gold had been picked clean. Only industrial mining remained. Mines, pumps, expensive equipment. Individual prospectors could no longer compete. The era of companies and capital had begun. Most gold seekers left. Some stayed in California and changed their occupation. Some became farmers, others merchants, others laborers. California changed rapidly. It became the 31st state of the United States. The population grew from around 14,000 in 1848 to 400,000 by 1860. San Francisco grew from a small settlement into a major city. Banks, newspapers, theaters, and port infrastructure appeared. All of this was built on the capital brought by gold and by serving the gold seekers. Money began to work in the economy. According to historians, during the years of the gold rush, about $2 billion worth of gold was extracted from California at the prices of that time. In today's money, that is roughly $80 billion. The gold rush became the perfect metaphor for financial bubbles. The scenario always repeats. A chance to get rich fast appears. Success stories are loud and celebrated. Stories of failure are barely heard. The early participants really do win. Those who arrive first took the easy money. The others come later, when most of the potential has already been exhausted. They work harder, take greater risks, and earn less. Often they end up working at a loss, just like the prospectors of the early 1850s. And the real money is once again made by those who serve the rush. Platforms, middlemen, sellers of tools, courses, and knowledge. While the crowd digs, someone is steadily selling shovels. The gold rush was less about gold and more about a dream, a desire to escape poverty and change one's fate. This dream pushed people to deadly risks. For most, it ended in disappointment. Over time, reality gave way to an idealized myth. The image of the brave prospector with a pan became part of the culture. But behind that image were dirt, disease, and loss. The reality was simple. Very few got rich, and most of them did not dig for gold. They sold shovels,